I know Jason was out fishing today, and I've already seen a photo from your trip.
Oh boy, it's going to be a topic of discussion.
Yeah, we're talking about, we've had Arnie on, and Captain L. Johnson was talking multi-species. You really went multi-species today.
Yeah, it was a first for anybody that might not know what you're talking about. We caught a sturgeon today. He didn't bite. But being in Milwaukee, it's a big river system, and I gotta think 20, 30 years ago they started a reintroduction program of stocking for sturgeon, and apparently it's working. It scared me. Mm-hmm. It hit a high coho board that had 30 feet, it had to be 3 feet, 4 feet below the surface. Yep. Totally the opposite of where you think a sturgeon would be hanging out.
Right.
And it took off. I honestly thought it was a king until I saw the tail come out of the water.
Like, what is that thing?
Yeah. And I had an idea, maybe.
Yeah.
But we got quite a few sheep's head in Milwaukee Harbor. So I didn't really know. Seagulls knew what it was. He came right up to the surface. So yeah, it was probably like 5 feet long, 60, 70 pounds, something like that.
Yeah.
Took 40 minutes of the trip. 40 minutes that I didn't have to talk, so that was nice. But no, nice surprise. It was crazy. In 25 years, it's the first one I've seen.
Yeah, and your chartered customer didn't show up today thinking that they're going to catch a sturgeon.
No, and the lake was actually pretty sloppy this afternoon. And my guys, I took them for a ride out in the lake, and they kind of looked at each other and said, "Do we have a different option?" I said, yeah, and I knew I wasn't going to do very well. Mm-hmm. But we went and had a good time, and that was the first fish we caught. Probably took us an hour and a half till we finally had something bite. But yeah, pretty crazy.
Yeah, I've gone sturgeon fishing in the river systems in Minnesota, and it's a good fight. And I think if you're trolling, it probably really is a good fight.
And it took everything.
Yeah,
I had, I don't know, 500-600 feet of line out on a line counter until I finally had to put it in neutral. Mm-hmm. I was like, yeah. And the wind was blowing. There was like no boat. It was such a horrible operation. And I knew how to explain how we got it to the boat. I had to hand line it.
Yeah. Well, that's the nice thing about fishing on a sporty day like today. You probably didn't have a lot of other folks out there getting in your way. It makes it a little easier to handle the boat. Yeah, a little bit. We were on a pretty big multiple trip, and some of the other groups went out into the lake and did pretty well on cohos and kings and everything else. And mm-hmm. I was the lonely wolf in the harbor with the sailboats. So it's a good time. So tell us about yourself. I mean, we went right into your fish, but tell me about yourself and your charter.
Well, this year's my 24th season of charter fishing. Started when I was a much younger man. Stay pretty busy throughout the summer. And yeah, I pretty much grew up on the lake and decided to spend my life on it, I guess.
Yeah.
So
tell me about the boat you're fishing. What are you running?
I run a 33-foot Wellcraft Coastal. It's a 98, so it's the new boat style that they kind of haven't changed since. Mm-hmm. Love it. For all my buddies that might be listening, yes, it's still the original motors. So I have 20 seasons on the original. I haven't touched them.
Very cool.
Yeah, very cool. I'm very excited about that, but my time is coming.
Yeah. You've been saving up?
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Yeah. It's coming. Yeah. So you fish out of Milwaukee? That's your main port?
Out of Milwaukee. So I think today I'm the furthest north guy, right? Sure. Yeah. And Milwaukee's a great port. We kind of get the best of both worlds, if you want to call it that. Mm-hmm. So obviously the king fishing from Port Washington north up to Door County is pretty darn good. Milwaukee's pretty darn good too. But then we also get the coho run. Now this year's coho run was a little bit different. I heard the other day somebody pounded them in like 2 rivers, and that's kind of unheard of. Yes. So it was some big batches. Port Washington's really, really good right now. Everything's just good right now. We actually needed this northeast wind.
So it's helping you up there?
I think it will. Everything was pretty scattered over the last week and a half or two. And I just had a bad run on bad weather days were the days I was supposed to fish, so I didn't get to fish very often. But the guys that did, it was spotty. But this should realign it. It cooled the water off out deep quite a bit even today. So that should pull the coves in a little bit closer. And there's quite a few kings by us now too. So
We've been having the other guys come in and they've kind of been describing what it looks like, the structure around your port. What's it like for you once you get out of the harbor and you start heading out? What kind of structure you looking at?
Milwaukee's pretty unique in that way. We have on the south end, I mean, we might as well start at that's north end of Racine, but you have Wind Point in Racine. And I'd call that like the southern boundary. We don't run that far, but it creates some cool current effects. And we have Fox Point to the north, which we fish quite a bit. That's only like a 7 or 8 mile run. We have a really hard clay bottom there, and we have one, it's not even a very big reef, but we have a couple points where there's a lot of structure, which makes Milwaukee probably the finest brown trout destination on the lake, if not one of the best in the country.
Yep.
We do really, really well there, especially early. This year was no exception. It was very, very good.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've heard about Milwaukee from a couple different guys is if you want to go brown trout fishing in Wisconsin, that's the place. Tell us a little bit about that, the brown trout fishing.
We just have the perfect setup for it. The harbor itself, so the protected harbor itself, it's like 3 miles long, and at its widest point, it's almost a mile wide. So you don't have to contend with weather too much. That's why I hit out in there today. But it creates, and it doesn't really freeze real hard either because it's such a big harbor. So I think the fish come in there in late fall and just stick around. Gobies are plentiful. The entire harbor's anywhere from 22 feet to 33 feet deep. So it's super accessible. You don't need a ton of gear to do it. It's just and we dump a ton of brown trout in Milwaukee. So the returns there are pretty good.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of people that ice fish it. Well, what you're saying, at that depth, if you just wanted to go out there, if you were really new to Great Lakes trolling and just had a real basic boat, I mean, you can just kind of long line it out there and fish for them.
A lot of guys do that, and the key is if you can get out in like the ice cold part of winter, if we have open water and you can somehow get a boat in the water, you kind of can't miss. You're going to catch fish. But as the season progresses a little bit, it gets a little bit tougher. You might have to have a little bit of gear. But early on, yeah, you could go flatline crankbaits and longline spoons and have some good success, as well as live bait fishing.
Gerard, you got something for Jason?
So yeah, for us down here, we're seeing Kenosha, Winthrop. We do have our hills that draws the king in. So what would be how do you guys approach your morning trips in the summertime?
Oh, well.
For kings.
For kings, all right. So kings, the key is get up earlier than you think you need to. And as I get older, that becomes a little bit tougher.
I'm feeling it.
But it's, I don't know, I'm a big flasher fly guy, and I'm not like a super glow guy. I like subtle glow. I think it can be too bright if you try to go crazy with it. So I'll just give it a quick flash. But picking up the current. Our mornings, Milwaukee is heavily based on current. Our fishery is, we have some structure, but not a lot of it. So, the key in the morning is figuring out where the current's coming from and how fast it's going. And then just watching your graph. If you'd asked me the same question 15 years ago, I would have said start in 60 feet of water, see what happens for the first hour and figure it out after that. But now with our water clarity and a whole bunch of things changing, you're just as good as wherever you found them the day before. Everything changes overnight nowadays. So if I had a pretty good king bite yesterday, I'd obviously go back to that spot. The chances of it being there are slim. So it's a different mentality. I don't know. When I'm king fishing, I'm pretty much flashers and flies across the board. And I'm usually going to start out the day a little bit shallower. I'm going to be trolling in some northeasterly direction. That's where our current mostly comes out of there. And let the chips fall where they may. But, the early morning bite burns up fairly quickly, especially if you have high sun. But like Arnie was talking about before me, they'll turn back on in the middle of the day. But you got to have the guts to stay in there and grind like 2 hours of bad fishing till it turns back on. And we get deep fairly quick, so we can kind of fish those kings, bail out to deeper water, find some steelhead or offshore cohos, and if we really feel like it, if we have the time, come back in the middle of the day. It's kind of nice when, when you're running a charter, you know that bite might be there, so you kind of pull out of whatever fish you might have out in this deeper water and point it towards the barn. Well, in Milwaukee, we get deep so fast that, faster than Kenosha and Racine, you're never really out of it. So a lot of times when I'm pointing it to the barn, we'll catch a couple kings in the last half hour of the trip. So it works out really well.
Yeah, that's actually pretty nice, because for us here to get to 200 and back, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's tougher. 200 is still a poke, but it's not as big of a poke as it is for you guys down here. I think I could be in 200 in like 7 miles. So it happens a little bit quicker. And the further north you go, the deeper it gets faster.
That's why you go northeast.
Right.
You talked a little bit about just things changing. You said it's very different now than it was 6 years ago. 15 years ago. And the last 10 years has been pretty much the same. Okay. Tell me about what's changed and why you think it's changed.
Well, when I first started this, if you would have tried to explain to me how much lead, core, and copper we were going to run someday, I would have called you crazy. That's all based on water clarity, zebra mussels, stuff like that. We're running way more lines than we ever used to have to for kings. For cohos, we always loaded the water. But even cohos nowadays are more picky, and that's because it's due to that water clarity. To give you an idea, I forget where I was running to, but I came over our southern reef a couple weeks ago, and I could see bottom. It was flat calm. I could see bottom in 40 feet.
Wow.
And 15 years ago, you might have had 10 feet of visibility, and fishing was easier then. But it's pretty easy now if you pay attention to, at times.
Yeah. Tell me about the fish themselves. You've been doing this for a long time. You've been out there. How the fish themselves changed from the time when you were getting started to now?
As far as health, or how do they react?
Let's go with both. I'd like to hear both.
All right. I personally feel the health of the lake is the best it's been in at least the last decade. We have more fish. The fish are healthier. I think we're in a much better place than we were 10 years ago. The fish themselves, how they've changed, it goes back to that pickiness. 10, 15 years ago, you go out in the morning and you'll catch fish in that little bit dirtier water. It was easier to do. Everything's more photosensitive. The way the alewives crunch down to the bottom in the middle of the day now is crazy. 15 years ago when the water was dirtier, you'd have bait balls up all day long, and you just find a hot one and you could stay in it and you'd be all good. So it's changed that way. I don't think the fish themselves have changed much. I think the conditions around them have changed. They're just reacting.
So how do you see that kind of moving forward as we go on in the next 5 years or so?
I don't think it's going to change. I think today's fisherman just has to be more versatile. If I'm comparing old times to new times, all we used to do was fish for kings. That was it. Most days they'd bite, some days they wouldn't. But now you have to become a little more well-rounded and say, all right, these kings aren't biting today. We got to bail with some deeper water. You got to be able to fish steelhead and suspended trout. And if that's not working, or if conditions really change and the water gets really cold close to shore, you can go catch brown trout in the middle of the summer. It'll happen right around July 15th this year. I caught a brown today because I was fishing the harbor, but if I don't go anywhere near that harbor and I stay outside of 70 feet of water, I won't see a brown trout till the middle of July. But then it'll get decent. For however long that water's cold close to shore, till it gets heated back up, you'll catch brown trout there too. So you just got to be able to switch, like, This morning really stunk fishing for kings. I'm not going to go do that again. All right, let's go for a ride and run some higher stuff for some steelhead. Just switching gears.
And what's that steelhead bite like outside of Milwaukee?
It's pretty good. But I think lake-wide, the steelhead bite might have been down a little bit last year, and it's all related to stocking. But now that's bouncing back, so I think the next 5 years for steelhead is going to be off the charts too. They started a new Skamania program back up in Wisconsin a couple years back. So that's another species that actually runs the rivers in July. So that it becomes a near shore fish midsummer, which is kind of cool for a steelhead. So if we get those back going to levels they used to, steelhead fishing will be incredible.
And we're starting to see more and more interest. So when we do Steelhead Show on the podcast, it gets great numbers. And people seem to be more and more interested in that. What do you think is behind that kind of interest and renewed interest in trolling for steelhead?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, they're the most acrobatic fish out there. Their bites are more vicious than a king bite is. Speed, they're a cool looking fish.
Right.
You know, they're really cool looking fish. And they're getting bigger. We were talking about the health. You're going to see a couple 20-pound steelhead this year for sure. Probably in one of some of the contests, but they're in great shape. We just got to bolster the numbers. The stocking's got to come up a little bit, and I think it'll be fantastic. And that's lake-wide, both sides of the lake.
You've been doing this for a while. What makes you tick? What gets you excited about going fishing?
Oh, nowadays? Oh, maybe just not having to be at home with the wife. No.
He's a grizzled veteran.
Yeah, I'm a grizzled veteran. No, I think any charter captain that's been doing it for a while that's still doing it still ticks the same way in some form that they did when they started. It changes a little bit because it becomes more of your life than an adventure. But if I didn't love it, I probably still wouldn't do it. And I still wake up every morning kind of excited to see what the day is going to bring. And I like people. I like customers. Learning what they're about, what they do, and creating that kind of rapport. So that's what kind of keeps me ticking.
What's the most difficult part of it?
The people. I say that jokingly. It's, every charter customer has an idea of what their day is going to be like. And no doubt about it, everybody wants to catch a limit of salmon or trout or whatever it is. Every day they want to kill it. Just not the reality. So a lot of times, sometimes you'll get groups that have this idea in their head, and you work hard and you try to get them on everything, and it just doesn't work out. So dealing with disappointment's probably the toughest part. But after 24 years, I think I deal with it pretty well. Come back next year, you never know what day you're going to have. Right. And I've seen very, very good fishing and very, very poor fishing in my life. So nowadays, if I'm in the middle, pretty happy.
Jerry, anything else for Jason?
Yeah, so you talked about the sturgeon stocking that Milwaukee did. I know they did walleyes back then too. And I think they stock brook trout also, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
Have you seen?
A ton.
And how do we find them?
Fish a harbor wall. In the marina, actually, is where I've seen most of them. But I follow quite a few pages on Facebook for guys that fish the Milwaukee River. And there's quite a few in there now. And I think we're on year 3 or 4 of that stocking program. And Milwaukee and Two Rivers get the biggest stocking of it. But I've seen pictures of 3-pounders already, 3-4-pounders. Beautiful fish.
Yeah.
But again, we want to bolster those numbers too. We started off with 50,000, I think. So they were split 25 and 25. And I think to make a real fishery out of it, we probably got to get up in that 200,000 fish range. I mean, it's a fishery now. You'd probably have to put your hours into it, but.
And it provides a near-shore fishery too, right? Because they don't really leave the rocks even in the summer.
Right.
Proper.
Yeah, I watched one yesterday swim next to the dock. I see them almost every day. There's probably 10 or 12 of them that are living.
Where's your dock again?
Right in front of A-Dock in Milwaukee.
Okay,
Yeah.
Jason, well, I appreciate you coming on, making
My
the
pleasure.
trip down. I know it's a little bit of a drive to get down here.
That's all right.
To see us, so appreciate you coming down. If people want to fish with you and find out more about you, where do they do it?
Best way is online or give me a call. I can be found at realsensation.com or give me a call at 414-384-8096.